Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of sources, extract the most important nuggets, and cut through the noise to help you become truly well-informed. Today, we're doing something truly special, something that feels incredibly relevant, even though it began over 2 millennia ago. Imagine stepping into a conversation that still shapes how we think about what's fair, what's right, and how we should live our lives, both individually and, collectively. We're diving deep into excerpts from Plato's Republic, a foundational text in Western philosophy. This isn't just about ancient history. It's about stepping into a vibrant intellectual wrestling match, a dynamic play of ideas where different characters offer their perspectives only to have them rigorously examined. Our mission for this deep dive is to extract the core philosophical insights, translate them into everyday language, and connect these abstract concepts to your daily realities in your families, your work, and your communities. We'll explore the viewpoints presented, comparing them, and seeing what timeless lessons they offer us today, focusing on those core philosophical ideas and their practical applications.
Exactly. And at the heart of this intellectual journey is Socrates, the central figure in these dialogues. He's depicted with an insatiable curiosity, believing deeply in asking questions of everyone, old and young, to get to the very heart of matters. He truly loved conversation, and as you'll soon hear, he was never afraid to push back, even on the most established figures of his time. You'll see his unique method of persistent questioning at play right from the start.
So let's jump right in with the first attempts to define justice and why, for Socrates, these common understandings just don't quite make the cut. Our journey begins with Cephalus, an old, wealthy patriarch who sees old age as a perfectly tolerable portion of existence. For him, justice is refreshingly straightforward, almost a matter of good social conduct, speaking the truth and paying your debts.
It's a very practical, common-sense morality, isn't it? Most of us begin our understanding of justice right there. Be honest, pay your bills, fulfill your obligations. It's the bedrock of societal function on a surface level. But Plato, through Socrates, immediately asks, is merely following these transactional rules truly justice or just, avoiding problems? It's a key distinction between a simple ethical checklist and a deeper, more profound virtue.
That's a great point. And just as we're settling into that sensible definition, Cephalus' son, Polemarchus, steps in. Our sources describe him with the frankness and impetuousness of youth. He quickly modifies his father's idea, quoting the poet Simonides, "Justice is doing good to your friends and harm to your enemies." He sees it as a matter of loyalty and retribution.
This is a subtle but significant shift. It introduces a social, almost tribal dimension. Think about how we often operate even today. We protect our friends, our family, our team. We might be less concerned about outsiders or even actively oppose those we perceive as enemies. This idea of loyalty-based justice is deeply ingrained in human behavior. It's a step beyond simply paying your debts. It defines justice in relation to group affiliation, but it's still quite limited in its scope, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. But Socrates, with his gentle yet firm dialectic, quickly starts to unravel Polemarchus' definition. He asks a critical question. Can a good or just person truly harm anyone, even an enemy? He skillfully guides Polemarchus to admit that to injure someone cannot be just. The sources highlight how Socrates links this concept to powerful figures who might espouse an eye for an eye justice, but he ultimately rejects it as unwise and contradictory to justice itself.
This is a powerful ethical principle. Socrates nudges us to consider if true justice can ever involve intentional harm, even to those we deem adversaries. If you're striving for genuine justice in your personal life or in a larger system, does taking revenge or seeking to hurt someone, regardless of their actions, align with that ideal? It challenges us to move beyond an eye for an eye mentality and question whether true goodness can ever be a source of injury. It's a really profound point.
And as soon as those everyday definitions fall short, a new bombastic character bursts onto the scene. Thrasymachus, described as the Chalcedonian giant. He's portrayed as vain and blustering, a true sophist of his time, confident in his own cleverness, but as Socrates shows, a mere child in argument. He even initially demands payment to speak, valuing persuasion over truth.
Right. The sophists were essentially intellectual mercenaries, skilled in rhetoric, valuing winning an argument over uncovering truth. We still see echoes of this today in public discourse, where clever arguments or emotional appeals often trump factual accuracy. It's a focus on performance and winning rather than genuine understanding, and Thrasymachus perfectly embodies that spirit. He comes in hot.
Absolutely. And his definition of justice is bold, even shocking. Justice is nothing else than the interest of the stronger. He argues that rulers make laws for their own advantage and subjects obey these laws. Therefore, injustice, on a grand scale, becomes the ultimate profit for the powerful.
This idea that might makes right, or that systems are rigged for those in charge, is a persistent one throughout history and, frankly, still resonates with many today. It forces us to ask, is justice merely a tool of power? Do those in positions of strength always define what is just? And is that truly justice? If laws only serve the powerful, then what incentive does anyone have to be just other than, fear of punishment? It's a deeply cynical yet understandable viewpoint that often reflects people's real-world experiences.
But Socrates doesn't let him get away with it. He brilliantly refutes Thrasymachus using analogies of various arts and professions. He likens rulers to skilled practitioners like physicians, pilots, or shepherds. He points out that a physician, in their true professional capacity, what he calls toi physician, considers the good of their patient, not their own good or profit. The art itself, whether as medicine or piloting a ship, aims at the perfection or well-being of its subject, not itself.
hmm And it's the same with a shepherd. Socrates asserts that a true shepherd tends the sheep for the sheep's good, not just for the pleasure of eating them or selling them. He's arguing that the true purpose of any art, including the art of ruling, is inherently to benefit those it serves. The perfection of the art is achieved when it benefits its subjects.
So Thrasymachus, despite his bluster, is cornered by Socrates' logic. He reluctantly admits that no art considers the interest of the stronger, but only the interest of the subject and weaker. Socrates then extends this to rulers, implying that true rule is for the benefit of others, not the ruler. He even suggests that good individuals only take office out of a fear of punishment, the worst being ruled by someone worse than themselves. This is a crucial pivot point, suggesting true leadership is a responsibility, not a pursuit of power.
This is a powerful philosophical argument for ethical leadership that resonates across any profession. It suggests that the true purpose of any role, especially one involving authority, isn't self-enrichment, but the well-being of those it serves. Does your doctor put your health first? Does a good teacher prioritize their students' learning? Socrates suggests that's their art, their true function. It challenges the very notion of power for power's sake, proposing instead that power, when rightly exercised, is a form of service to a greater good. It's a really high bar.
So Thrasymachus has been silenced, but the discussion is far from over. Now we meet Glaucon, whom the sources describe as the most pugnacious of men. Utterly dissatisfied with Thrasymachus' hasty retreat, he wanted to have the battle out. Glaucon demands a more profound understanding, pressing Socrates. Is being just always better than being unjust? And what are justice and injustice in themselves? How do they inwardly work in the soul beyond any external rewards or punishments? This is where the deep dive into the individual really begins, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. To frame this profound question, Glaucon sets up a very useful framework for categorizing goods. He describes three classes. First, goods welcomed for their own sake, like harmless pleasures. Second, goods desired both for their own sake and their results, such as knowledge, sight, or health. And third, goods pursued only for their results, even if they're disagreeable in themselves, like gymnastic training, medicine, or making money. Socrates places justice in that second highest class among those goods which he who would be happy desires both for their own sake and for the sake of their results.
But then, the Glaucon points out, the many, most people that is, are of another mind. They think justice belongs to the third class, something troublesome, pursued primarily for external rewards and reputation, but disagreeable in itself. It's the kind of thing you do because you have to, not because you want to, like eating your vegetables maybe.
It's sort of, yeah. This contrast is crucial. Most people, in their everyday lives, might view justice as a necessary evil, a set of rules imposed for society's good, but which doesn't necessarily make them feel good internally. Plato, through Socrates, believes justice is intrinsically good, a fundamental component of a happy and flourishing life, regardless of external recognition. It's the difference between doing something because it's right and doing it because you'll get a reward or avoid a punishment. This challenges us to look beyond immediate gratification and external validation.
To really press his point, Glaucon proposes a truly provocative test case. Imagine a perfectly just man versus a perfectly unjust man. The unjust man he describes as pursuing a reality. He wants to be truly unjust, but seem just. This man bears rule in the city, marries whom he will, trades to his advantage, and is considered happy and blessed by all who hear of his consummation of injustice. He builds a picture and shadow of virtue around him while being the subtle and crafty fox within. Sounds familiar, maybe.
Potentially. And in stark contrast, the perfectly just man is described as being just but seeming unjust. This man will be scourged, racked, bound, will have his eyes burnt out, and at last, after suffering every kind of evil, he will be impaled. He faces utter ruin and suffering precisely because he is just but lacks the reputation for it.
Wow. That's intense.
It is. This is a truly provocative thought experiment designed to strip away all external factors. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Society often values the appearance of virtue over its raw, suffering reality. It exposes our collective bias towards external success, even when achieved through questionable means, over genuine, unrewarded integrity. It challenges us to look within ourselves and ask, if the just suffer and the unjust prosper, what is the motivation for justice in itself? What do you truly value when all external incentives are removed?
And Glaucon's brother, Adeimantus, steps in to reinforce this challenge. He points out that poets and storytellers, the cultural influencers of their time, have never blamed injustice or praised justice, except with a view to the glories, honors, and benefits which flow from them.
Yeah.
So all the popular tales glorify external rewards for justice, never its intrinsic value. It's all about the payoff.
Exactly. This highlights the profound impact on young minds. If all they hear is that justice pays off externally, why would they be truly just if they could get the rewards of injustice through deception? They'll choose crooked ways of deceit if it leads to a loftier tower, a position of power and perceived happiness. Adeimantus is highlighting a fundamental flaw in how society teaches morality. It's a critique that still holds true today. What messages do our stories and media convey about the rewards of integrity versus cunning? What values are we inadvertently instilling in the next generation?
Adeimantus stresses the crucial request to Socrates. Show not only the superiority which justice has over injustice, but what effect they have on the possessor of them, which makes the one a good and the other an evil to him. He's asking for an internal justification for justice, separate from any external consequences. Show me why it's good for me deep down.
This is truly about intrinsic value. Take away the reputation, the monetary rewards, the fear of punishments. Strip all that away. Is justice still good for your soul? Does it make you a happier, more flourishing individual, regardless of how the world perceives or treats you? This is the core deep dive question for us. Can justice be its own reward, an internal state of harmony and well-being?
So, with a profound challenge laid bare to prove that justice is intrinsically good for the individual, regardless of external rewards, Socrates decides to tackle the problem on a larger canvas, the state. He proposes building an ideal city, a hypothetical blueprint to see justice writ large. And the first foundation of this ideal state is what he calls the one-man, one-work principle. This means each individual should be put to the use for which nature intended them, focusing on one task, continuously throughout their life. This way, the whole city would be one, and not many, functioning harmoniously. This applies to craftsmen, farmers, and especially to the guardians, the protectors of the state.
In our modern world of multitasking and diverse skill sets, this might seem extreme. We often value adaptability and breadth of experience. But Plato is arguing for deep expertise and a unified societal purpose. He believes that focusing on one's natural strengths and designated role leads to a more harmonious community and individual fulfillment. When everyone does what they're best suited for, and only that, the entire society benefits from specialized excellence. It's about optimizing human potential for the common good, creating a truly interdependent society. A bit like a perfectly functioning machine, perhaps.
Maybe. And these guardians are absolutely paramount. They need exceptional qualities, a natural aptitude, courage, magnificence, apprehension, memory, and noble and generous tempers. These aren't just any ordinary citizens. They are an elite, carefully selected few.
Right. It's important to remember that Plato isn't aiming for the disproportionate happiness of any one class within this ideal state. He's aiming for the greatest happiness of the whole. He uses an analogy. You can't make the eyes of a statue beautiful at the expense of the face, or the guardians happy if it makes them anything but guardians. Their purpose is to serve the state, not to indulge themselves. To achieve this, guardians must also be vigilant against two pervasive evils: wealth and poverty. Wealth, he argues, breeds luxury and indolence, while poverty breeds meanness and viciousness. Both, in his view, corrupt workmen and their work.
And he even makes a pragmatic argument for this. A state composed of trained warriors, free from the distractions of personal wealth, would be formidable against rich, untrained armies. It's lean, wiry dogs versus fat and tender sheep, as the sources vividly put it. They'd be far more effective in defending the city, united by purpose rather than personal gain.
Makes sense from a military standpoint.
Now, if we're talking about cultivating these exceptional guardians, what's their foundational education? Plato outlines it meticulously, starting with music. But music in Plato's time wasn't just about pleasant sounds. It encompassed literature, poetry, and storytelling. It was about the shaping of the soul itself, the very character of the young.
And this is where Plato's strict censorship comes in, particularly regarding theological principles. He insists that poets must only say that God is not the author of all things, but of good only. Stories depicting gods causing evil, strife, or human misery are absolutely forbidden. God must be presented as unchanging and true. Gods cannot be magicians changing forms or deceiving mankind because the superhuman and divine is absolutely incapable of falsehood.
The reasoning here is crucial. Young people, he argues, cannot judge what is allegorical and what is literal. Anything they receive into their mind at that age is likely to become indelible and unalterable. If they're taught that the gods are deceitful or cause evil, they might emulate those behaviors. So what we're seeing here is Plato's absolute conviction that everything shapes the soul. He's building a system of total spiritual and intellectual curation.
It's quite extreme by our standards. Think about the stories we tell our children today, through media, literature, or even family narratives. Are they instilling virtues like truth and benevolence, or inadvertently normalizing deceit and strife, even if it's for dramatic effect? Plato would argue that these narratives profoundly shape a child's moral purpose and character, and therefore they need to be carefully curated to foster virtuous thoughts, not merely to entertain.
This censorship extends to heroic tales, too. Narratives that depict the underworld as real and terrible, or show heroes lamenting their fate, like Achilles, are forbidden. Why? Because such stories might make future warriors fear death, and no man can be courageous who has the fear of death in him. Similarly, stories depicting insolence towards rulers, gluttony, drunkenness, or even gods succumbing to lust are to be excluded. These things, Plato says, do not conduce to temperance. What is allowed is language showing obedience and silent awe of leaders. Seems a bit controlling.
Very controlling. This really emphasizes Plato's belief in the immense power of narrative. He profoundly believes that what we consume through stories shapes our character. If we constantly hear tales of greed, violence, or injustice, it can desensitize us and encourage those behaviors in ourselves. It's not just entertainment, it's character formation, and a just state needs citizens with just characters. This is a powerful idea that we often grapple with even today, in debates about media content and its influence on society.
But Plato takes it even further with his radical rejection of imitative poetry. He states quite bluntly that all poetical imitations are ruinous to the understanding of the hearers. He argues that a poet, like a painter, will depict a cobbler or a carpenter, though he knows nothing of their actual craft. The poet lays on the colors of the several arts, himself understanding their nature only enough to imitate them. He describes them as thrice removed from the truth, merely creating images, not true knowledge, basically calling poets fakers.
In a philosophical sense, yes. This is a sophisticated critique of art. Plato isn't saying art is inherently bad, but that it often appeals to our emotions and lower faculties rather than our reason. He highlights that imitative art awakens and nourishes and strengthens the feelings and impairs the reason. It appeals to the passionate and fitful temper of the soul, which is easy to imitate, rather than the calm, rational part. He even mentions an ancient quarrel between philosophy and poetry. This connects directly to contemporary debates about media influence. Does popular media, through its dramatic depictions, ever glorify superficiality or irrational passion over thoughtful reason? Plato would argue it does, actively diverting us from truth.
And this philosophical rigor extends to the very forms of music itself, the harmonies and rhythms. Only two types of harmonies are allowed for the Guardians: the Dorian, which is warlike, brave, and enduring, and the Phrygian, which is peaceful, persuasive, and temperate. These are the strain of necessity and the strain of freedom, the strain of the unfortunate and the strain of the fortunate, the strain of courage and the strain of temperance. All other soft or drinking harmonies, those that might lead to indolence or excessive emotion, are banished. Rhythms, too, must be simple and expressions of a courageous and harmonious life, not complex or varied.
Just as words shape our thoughts, Plato believed sounds shape our emotions and character. Certain melodies and rhythms, he argued, make us soft and lazy or encourage drunkenness and indolence, while others inspire courage and self-control. It's a striking belief in the ethical power of music, suggesting that aesthetic choices have direct moral consequences. It's not just about what sounds good, it's about what builds good character, influencing the soul at a subconscious level. It's fascinating, really.
Now, if music is for the soul, then gymnastic is for the body, but with a twist. Socrates explains that gymnastic is not for the training of the body, but chiefly the improvement of the soul. It stimulates the spirited element of nature, which, if rightly educated, gives courage. So even physical training has a spiritual character-building purpose.
Exactly. And the diet and lifestyle prescribed for these guardians are equally rigorous. It's a simple and military gymnastic, emphasizing Homeric fair roast meats, no fish, no sweet sauces. Abstinence from intoxication is paramount. Guardians are to be like wakeful dogs, keen-sensed, able to endure changes in climate and food during campaigns, not sleepy like ordinary athletes who are prone to illness from rigid regimens. It's all about building resilience and readiness, not just brute strength.
The critical point here is the harmonization of music and gymnastic. Socrates emphasizes that exclusive devotion to gymnastic leads to hardness and ferocity, a savage who hates philosophy. Conversely, exclusive devotion to music leads to softness and effeminacy, melting away spirit, becoming feeble. It's about balance. You need both.
Precisely. The ideal guardian, then, has both. Music refines the spirit without making it soft. Gymnastics strengthens the body without making the mind dull. The one who mingles music with gymnastic in the fairest proportions is called the true musician and harmonist of the soul. This isn't just about physical health. It's about integrating mind and body to create a balanced, resilient character capable of ruling. It's a holistic development model where every aspect of upbringing is geared towards cultivating moral and intellectual excellence. Quite an undertaking.
With the Guardian's education set, we move to their way of life within this ideal state. Socrates proposes a radical concept for his time, a community of women and children among the guardians, based on the idea that friends have all things in common. Guardians and their wives must live in common houses and meet at common meals. None of them will have anything specially his or her own. No private property for the rulers.
And what's truly groundbreaking for their era is the radical equality for women. If women are to have the same duties as men, and Plato argues they should, if they have the natural aptitude, they must have the same nurture and education, including the art of war. While women are acknowledged as having weaker natures in terms of physical strength, they differ only in comparative strength or weakness, not in their fundamental capacity for guardianship.
Wait, so for all his strictness, Plato was actually advocating for gender equality in leadership, even in combat. That's genuinely mind-blowing for ancient Greece. How did that idea land at the time? The sources even address the potential for ridicule, like the sight of women exercising naked in the palastra, which would have been scandalous then. But Socrates dismisses this, saying that when experience showed that to let all things be uncovered was far better than to cover them up, then the man was perceived to be a fool who directs the shafts of his ridicule at any other site but that of folly and vice. He challenges conventional norms by pointing out that what is useful is noble.
Exactly. This is a powerful challenge to social norms and traditional gender roles that still resonates today. Plato asks us to look past superficial differences and traditional expectations. If someone has a natural aptitude for a role, why should their gender preclude them from it? It's a very progressive stance for an ancient philosopher, aiming for a true meritocracy based on natural ability for the good of the state.
However, this shared life comes with a rather unsettling aspect: regulated procreation. Marriages are to be sacred and most beneficial, with selective breeding from the best only, and only those of ripe age. Women 20-40, men 25-55. And here's where it gets truly controversial. Offspring of the inferior or of the better, when they chance to be deformed, will be put away in some mysterious unknown place. Children are raised communally. Parents will never know their own children, calling all children born in a certain period their sons and daughters. That's chilling.
It is, undoubtedly. Plato's vision here is certainly controversial, raising profound questions about individual rights versus state utility and the potential for dehumanization. But it forces us to confront how societies balance unity, procreation, and defense. The goal, as Plato sees it, is national unity. Can there be any greater evil than discord and distraction and plurality where unity ought to reign? He even suggests children are to be mounted on horses and taken to safe expeditions to see war as a unique form of training. And a key distinction is drawn between discord among Hellenes, treated as friends to be reconciled, no devastation, and war with barbarians, natural enemies. It's a pragmatic, almost clinical approach to societal management. Hard to swallow, though.
Definitely. All right, now we arrive at what Socrates himself calls the greatest ways. The idea is so radical, he feared it would drown him in laughter and dishonor. Until philosophers are kings, or the kings and princes of this world have the spirit and power of philosophy, cities will never have rest from their evils.
This is the core of Plato's ideal state. He defines true philosophers as lovers of all true being, constantly striving after eternal and unchanging knowledge, not just appearances. They hate lies and possess justice, courage, temperance, and memory. These are the qualities essential for governing justly and wisely because they are oriented towards fundamental truth.
But he acknowledges a problem. The very qualities that make a man a philosopher may, if he be ill-educated, divert him from philosophy. Many are spoiled, and few escape this corruption. He points out that pretenders, those who are not true philosophers, bring philosophy itself into disrepute. Socrates even mentions his own daemonium, his unique internal monitor, as a rare example of guidance in this regard.
Right. The true philosopher, then, faces a dilemma. One who has tasting how sweet and blessed a possession philosophy is, but sees the madness of the multitude and the corruption of politics, may retire under the shelter of a wall, content to live pure from evil or unrighteousness. This is a great work, yes, but not the greatest, unless he finds a state suitable to him. For in a suitable state, he will have a larger growth and be the savior of his country, as well as of himself. It's a call for philosophers to engage, not retreat.
But how did these philosopher-kings attain this true being and eternal knowledge? Socrates explains this path through three powerful allegories: the sun, the divided line, and the cave. Let's start with the allegory of the sun and the good. He uses a striking analogy to explain the highest good, comparing it to the sun itself.
It's a beautiful analogy. Just as the sun is the author of light, which enables sight to see visible objects, the idea of good is the author of truth and knowledge, enabling the mind to understand being. The good is not knowledge or truth itself, but has a place of honor yet higher, exceeding essence in dignity and power. The soul, like the eye, perceives and understands when resting upon that on which truth and being shine. But when turned towards the twilight of becoming and perishing, then she has opinion only, seeing dimly. It's an analogy to show us that ultimate reality, the good, illuminates all other truths.
Next, the divided line. This is diagrammatic representation of reality and knowledge. It divides the visible world into images, like shadows and reflections, and actual objects, animals, plants, corresponding to what he calls opinion. Above this is the intelligible world, divided into mathematical objects, studied hypothetically using visible images, and the forms or ideas, which are grasped by dialectic without images, reaching the first principle. This corresponds to knowledge.
This isn't just abstract theory, it's a map for understanding how we acquire knowledge and the varying degrees of certainty we can have. It reminds us that there are different levels of understanding and reality. Are we only perceiving shadows and reflections, or can we truly grasp the essence of things? It's a powerful scale of reality and corresponding cognition, from mere imagining to pure intellect. It really makes you think about what you really know.
And this path to true knowledge culminates in perhaps Plato's most enduring image, the allegory of the cave. It's a vivid, almost cinematic thought experiment. For listeners who might remember it from school, what's the fundamental truth Plato's trying to unveil with this image of prisoners in shadows?
The allegory asks you to imagine people chained in an underground den from childhood, seeing only shadows cast by a fire, believing these shadows to be reality. Then, one is liberated, and his painful ascent to the sunlight is a journey of enlightenment. Initially dazzled, he gradually sees reflections, objects, and then the sun itself. He will felicitate himself on the change and pity them, the prisoners still trapped in illusion. But if he returns to the cave, his eyes full of darkness, he appears ridiculous to the prisoners who would put him to death if he tried to free them. This is a powerful metaphor for education and leadership. Those who truly understand must be compelled to return and govern, even if it's a worse life for them personally. Because as Socrates reminds us, the happiness was to be in the whole state.
So the philosopher-king isn't seeking personal power, but is compelled by a sense of duty, almost reluctantly. He also argues that the state in which the rulers are most reluctant to govern is always the best, most quietly governed, and the state in which they are most eager, the worst. The true ruler is not meant by nature to regard his own interest, but that of his subjects.
It's a profound statement on leadership motivation. Only in the state which offers a better life than that of a ruler, where they are truly rich not in silver and gold, but in virtue and wisdom, will the best govern. This highlights that external power doesn't equate to internal happiness, and that true leaders are driven by something far greater than personal gain. It completely reframes our conventional understanding of leadership, stressing selflessness and wisdom.
So what's the rigorous curriculum designed to mold these philosopher-kings? It goes far beyond mere music and gymnastic. Socrates asks, what branch of knowledge is there, my dear Glaucon, which is of the desired nature, since all the useful arts were reckoned mean by us?
He begins with arithmetic and calculation, not for practical purposes like merchants, but for the sake of the soul herself, compelling the soul to reason about abstract numbers, moving from becoming to truth and being. It cultivates intellectual power by forcing the mind to engage with pure abstract concepts rather than just visible or tangible objects. Those talented in calculation, he notes, are generally quick at every other kind of knowledge.
Then comes geometry. This, he says, is knowledge of the eternal, not of aught perishing and transient. It draws the soul towards truth and creates the spirit of philosophy. He laments that geometricians often focus on practical application, confusing the necessities of geometry with those of daily life, missing its true, higher purpose.
He also mentions solid geometry, which at the time was in a ludicrous state due to lack of patronage. But he argues that with state support, its natural charm would allow it to flourish. This underscores the idea that certain intellectual pursuits, crucial for the development of the soul, require societal backing to reach their full potential.
Astronomy is next, but not just gaping at the heavens. Its true purpose is to use the spangled heavens as a pattern to apprehend the true motions of absolute swiftness and absolute slowness by reason and intelligence, but not by sight. He insists we should employ problems and let the heavens alone. Basically, use astronomy to think, not just to stargaze.
That's it exactly. It means using the visible sky as a starting point to understand the underlying mathematical and rational order, moving beyond mere observation to true intellectual comprehension. It's about looking upwards mentally, not just physically, and understanding the eternal principles that govern the cosmos.
And then harmonics, described as the counterpart to astronomy, relating to the ears as astronomy does to the eyes.
Here again, it's not just about heard sounds, as many harmony teachers focused on. The true goal is the natural harmonies of number, and reflecting why some numbers are harmonious and others not. Plato believed that just as words shape our thoughts, sounds shape our emotions and character, and studying these underlying numerical relationships trains the mind in order and reason.
And finally, the coping stone of all studies, dialectic.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate stage, the peak.
Indeed. This is defined as the ability to attain a conception of the essence of each thing, capable of defining the idea of good rationally, not by appeals to opinion, but to absolute truth. It's the ultimate unifying knowledge. When all these studies reach the point of intercommunion and connection with one another and come to be considered in their mutual affinities, then will the pursuit of them have a value. The comprehensive mind is always the dialectical, capable of seeing how all truths connect. It's the highest form of understanding.
This is a lifelong journey. Childhood is filled with amusement and early math. At age 20, sciences are brought together. At 30, dialectic begins for 5 years. Then at 35, 15 years of practical office where they get experience of life and are tested to see whether, when they are drawn all manner of ways by temptation, they will stand firm or flinch. And finally, at age 50, they reach their consummation, beholding the absolute good and ruling. Phew, that's commitment.
It absolutely is. Plato lays out an educational system designed to cultivate intellectual and moral excellence, not just specialized skills. It's an intense, rigorous process because, as the sources say, the mind more often faints from the severity of study than from the severity of gymnastics. What does this tell us about the purpose of education in our own lives and for our leaders today? Is our education designed to build character and wisdom, or merely vocational skills? Plato suggests the former is indispensable for true justice.
So we've explored Plato's ideal, the truly just state, and the philosopher-king, but Plato doesn't stop there. He then turns to the inevitable decline, mirroring it in both the state and the individual soul, re-emphasizing that the good and true city or state and the good in man is of the same pattern. The evil is one which affects not only the ordering of the state, but also the regulation of the individual soul. It all connects.
It's a powerful parallel. Plato believes that wisdom, courage, and temperance reside in the soul, just as they would in an ideal state. A state that is master of itself, meaning its better part rules the worse, is temperate. The decline of the state, then, is directly reflected in the decline of the individual soul, a loss of internal harmony where the rational part of the soul loses control.
The first step down from the ideal state, according to Plato, is a timocracy, a government ruling by honor and ambition.
The timocratical man, then, is characterized by spirit and ambition. He's drawn opposite ways. Perhaps his father tries to nourish the rational principle in his soul, but others encourage the passionate and appetitive. As a result, he becomes arrogant and ambitious, driven by a desire for honor and victory. Think of a person whose drive for achievement or recognition dominates their decisions, even within their family or community. Their pride and thirst for distinction overshadow pure reason, leading to a life ruled by a thirst for external recognition.
From timocracy, the state descends into an oligarchy. which is described as a government resting on a valuation of property in which the rich have power and the poor man is deprived of it. It's rule by wealth, a dangerous shift from honor to material gain.
Right. The oligarchical man illustrates this shift. A son of a timocrat might see his father ruined by the state, humbled by poverty. This experience teaches him to knock ambition and passion from his soul's throne. He takes to money-making and seats the concupiscent and covetous element on the vacant throne, making reason and spirit sit down on the ground obediently. This is the person who becomes entirely focused on acquiring money, often at the expense of honor or higher pursuits. Their identity becomes tied to their wealth, and every decision is filtered through a financial lens. As the source says, love of wealth and the spirit of moderation cannot exist together. They just clash.
And from oligarchy, we move to democracy. This transition is brought about by an insatiable desire for freedom. Sounds good, but maybe too much of a good thing.
That's Plato's argument. A democracy, he argues, thirsting for freedom, has evil cupbearers presiding over the feast and has drunk too deeply of the strong wine of freedom. Rulers who don't indulge this insatiable desire are called cursed oligarchs. This unbridled freedom, Plato warns, then finds its way into private houses, leading to anarchy that ends by getting among the animals and infecting them.
The consequences are seen even in the family unit. The father grows accustomed to descend to the level of his sons and to fear them, and the son is on a level with his father, he having no respect or reverence for either of his parents. There's a don't-care attitude about trifles, and a disregard for fine principles. Anyone who professes to be the people's friend is promoted to honor, even if they lack true statesmanship.
And in this context, Plato introduces the distinction between necessary and unnecessary pleasures. Necessary pleasures are those we cannot get rid of and whose satisfaction benefits us, like simple food for health. Unnecessary pleasures are those we can get rid of and which do no good or even harm, like luxurious foods or excess. The democratic man, Plato argues, indulges in these unnecessary pleasures, giving equal weight to all desires. Plato's critique forces us to consider the fine line between liberty and license in our own lives and societies. Does unbridled freedom truly serve us if it leads to disrespect, lack of discipline, and the indulgence of every fleeting desire?
This brings us to the final and worst form of government and soul, tyranny, the bottom of the barrel.
Pretty much. The tyrannical man is one dominated by a single, insatiable love which acts as his tyrant. This overwhelming desire leads him to any reckless deed by which he can maintain himself and the rabble of his associates. When the noxious class of these individuals grows numerous, they choose from among themselves the one who has most of the tyrant in his own soul, and him they create their tyrant. He rules by force, crushing opposition, even beating his dear old fatherland or motherland. Grim stuff. The tyrant, Plato notes, is always either the masters or servants, and never the friends of anybody. The tyrant never tastes of true freedom or friendship. He is treacherous, isolated, and utterly unjust, unable to truly connect with anyone. Plato dramatically concludes that the tyrannical state is the wretchedest form of government, and the tyrannical man is by far the most miserable of all men. He is always full of fear, poor in spirit, and insatiable, his soul enslaved by his desires. He never tastes true freedom or friendship. It's the waking reality of what we dreamed, the ultimate nightmare of internal disorder. This is the ultimate lesson. External power, when unchecked by reason and virtue, doesn't equate to internal happiness. The pursuit of unchecked desires, even on a grand scale, ultimately leads to a life of fear, poverty of spirit, and misery.
To reinforce the misery of the tyrannical life, Socrates delves into the nature of true pleasure. He explains that hunger, thirst, and similar bodily sensations are inanitions of the bodily state, a fancy word for a lack or emptiness. But ignorance and folly, he argues, are inanitions of the soul, and emptiness of the mind.
Correspondingly, food is the satisfaction for bodily inanition, while wisdom is the satisfaction for the soul's inanition. The satisfaction derived from that which has more existence, that which is invariable, immortal, and true, is truer than that from what has less existence, that which is variable and mortal. True pleasure comes from satisfying the higher, more real parts of us, not just scratching an itch.
He uses a vivid analogy. Those who know not wisdom and virtue, and are always busy with gluttony and sensuality, like cattle, with their eyes always looking down and their heads stooping to the earth, they fatten and feed and breed, and they kill one another by reason of their insatiable lust. Their pleasures, he says, are mere shadows and pictures of the true. It's a powerful image of a life unfulfilled by mere bodily gratification.
The wise man, by contrast, will look at the city which is within him and take heed that no disorder occur in it. He regulates his property accepts honors that make him better, and avoids those that disorder his life. This is the essence of self-governance. And even if an ideal state never exists, in fact, for he admits it's merely a pattern laid up in heaven, the wise man will live after the manner of that city, having nothing to do with any other. By governing our inner city with reason, pursuing true knowledge and virtue, we can achieve a profound form of happiness and stability, regardless of external circumstances. It's about internal order.
We've journeyed through justice in the state and the individual, and now Plato brings us to perhaps the most profound part of this discussion: the nature of the soul itself. Socrates argues for the indestructible nature of the soul. He claims that injustice or other evil which exists in the soul does not waste and consume her or bring her to death. Furthermore, external bodily evils like disease or injury cannot destroy the soul unless they make it more unjust.
The conclusion is powerful. The soul, which cannot be destroyed by an evil, whether inherent or external, must exist forever, and if existing forever, must be immortal. Plato suggests that reason will not allow us to believe the soul in its truest nature is full of variety and dissimilarity. Its true nature, he argues, is constant and simple, not composed of many elements.
To illustrate this, Socrates uses the striking analogy of the sea god Glaucus. He describes Glaucus, whose original image can hardly be discerned because his natural members are broken off and crushed and damaged by the waves, and incrustations have grown over them of seaweed and shells and stones, so that he is more like some monster than he is to his own natural form. And the soul which we behold is in a similar condition, disfigured by 10,000 ills. We're all covered in barnacles, essentially. That's a good way to put it. So where then must we look for the soul's true nature? Not at its present disfigured state, but at her love of wisdom. Plato suggests how different she would become if wholly following this superior principle and borne by a divine impulse out of the ocean in which she now is, and disengaged from the stones and shells and things of earth and rock. This is the call to philosophy, to return the soul to its pure, immortal essence. It's a profound challenge for each of us. How much of our own seaweed and shells, the worries, distractions, and fleeting desires of daily life prevent us from seeing our truest selves and pursuing genuine wisdom? To cap off this incredible journey, Socrates introduces the myth of a story about the afterlife where souls choose their next lives, providing a glimpse beyond our earthly existence. It's a fascinating narrative about cosmic order and individual choice. A bit of a departure, but powerful.
It is complex, yes. The myth describes a grand cosmic order, a line of light straight as a column, extending right through the whole heaven and through the earth, holding the universe together. On this is the spindle of necessity, with its 8 whorls representing the planetary spheres, each with the siren singing a single note, forming a harmony. The 3 fates, daughters of necessity, accompany with their voices singing of the past, present, and future, guiding the revolutions. This myth, despite its fantastical elements, reinforces Plato's belief in an underlying order and structure to reality, both moral and physical, that is beyond our immediate perception, and underscores the ultimate responsibility of the soul in its choices before rebirth. It's a powerful narrative about personal accountability in the grand scheme of things. What you choose matters eternally. #tag outro.
What an incredible journey we've just taken through Plato's Republic. We started with those initial everyday definitions of justice, saw them fall short, and then moved through the profound challenge about justice's intrinsic value. We explored Plato's blueprint for an ideal state, the meticulous education of his guardians, and that truly radical concept of philosopher-kings. We then witnessed the sobering decline of states and souls from democracy to oligarchy, democracy, and finally tyranny, before reflecting on the immortal soul and the illuminating myth of We've seen how he dissects justice, not just as an external act, but as an internal state of the soul. It's been quite a ride.
Absolutely. And if there are a few core lessons to take away from this deep dive for your own life, they would be these. First, the continuous quest for truth beyond mere appearances is essential for genuine understanding and a well-ordered mind. Second, the profound importance of self-governance and internal harmony, how regulating the city within you is crucial, and how that internal state ultimately reflects in your family, your work, and your community. Third, the immense power of education and the stories we consume to shape our character, for better or worse. Fourth, the ethical responsibility of leadership that true authority serves the good of the whole, not self-interest. And finally, the idea that true happiness is found not in external rewards or unchecked desires, but in virtue, wisdom, and the pursuit of a just soul.
Plato asks us to consider, If our greatest struggle is not with external enemies, but with the disorder within ourselves, and if the truest form of rule is self-rule guided by wisdom, what kind of state are you building within your own soul, and how is it reflected in the world you choose to inhabit? That's something to chew on.
hmm This deep dive into the Republic is just a starting point. There's so much more to unpack, and the questions it raises are as relevant today as they were in ancient Greece. We hope this exploration helps you on your own journey toward understanding justice in yourself and in the world